one section of your book, Open When, is when you're really hard on yourself and you've done things that you regret, and we've all been there, but you cannot, like, you're really struggling to forgive yourself. What are some tools and strategies that you recommend when you have when you're just really hard on yourself?
Yeah. I think looking at your relationship with failure is huge and a real game changer, actually. When I talked about this idea of, going on live TV and it being terrifying and that I needed to commit to looking after myself, that was a shift in my relationship with failure, that I committed to looking after myself in the face of setbacks and humiliation and failure that might happen. That if the inside of your head is not a safe place to be, how are you ever going to take risks? How are you ever going to move forward? If, I talked about one of the things I used to talk about in therapy when people were highly self-critical is this idea that, imagine if I was going to lock you in a room for a whole year, so 24/7 for a whole year, you couldn't come out. And in there, I was going to put your high school bully, the worst person you can think of from your early days, and you're going to live with them 24/7 for a year. How might you feel when you came out?
Horrid.
Would you
beaten down, scared? Like my first thing that I thought was, my God, I guess I better figure out how to be friends with this person or else they're going to destroy me.
Yeah. Yeah. So someone who just hammers you all the time.
Oh my God,
all
yes.
the time. You're never going to come out of that feeling at your best.
Right.
But imagine now if I said, okay, I'm going to lock you in that room for the year, but you get to take your best friend. How would you feel different when you came out?
I'd feel fantastic. Like I'm actually going away to camp.
Yeah. Like a holiday, right?
Yes.
You would have a great time and you would feel encouraged about whatever you're going to do next and happy. And really that idea of being in that room with a person is you inside your own head. The way that you speak to yourself can either be a really good friend or a bully. And because you're with yourself 24/7, it will have the same impact, as that scenario of, am I spending time with someone who's having a positive impact on me or someone who's having a negative impact on me? But the great news is that you have control of that and you can begin to shift how you speak to yourself.
How do you begin to talk to yourself as a friend if you actually believe that you're a bad person or that you look in the past and you see lots of evidence of the mistakes that you've made?
Yeah. Well, I think if you're looking back and you're seeing how hard you are on yourself, the fact that you can recognize it is a sign of progress, right? When I look back on my early videos that I put out onto the internet and I think, oh my goodness, I can barely watch it. I just can barely look. And my response then is always, that's a sign of progress. If we weren't doing better videos now, I wouldn't be so cringy when I watch the old ones, right? So it's a sign that you're learning and you're progressing. And so when you look back and there's something you regret or you think, how could I be so stupid? How could I get that so wrong?
Right.
That's a sign that you're not there now. And, I love this idea of elite athletes employ coaches with so much thought and precision, right? They don't employ that high school bully to get them through, really difficult competitions or help them improve their game or anything like that. They employ someone who has their back, has their best interests at heart, believes that they have huge potential and need to do some hard work to get there. And someone who's always going to be honest with them, but is going to bring that honesty with kindness and compassion and forward thinking. And so when we think of that kind of idea of, people employ coaches like that because it works and because it helps them to bring their best. But you apply that to normal life and we all want to bring our best, right? We all want to keep progressing and learning and bringing out the best in ourselves. And so what you need is to be the coach for yourself. No one else is there 24/7, not even our family. But if we can have that idea, it's not so much exactly what you say every time, what are the words I need to say to myself? It's an idea of, what would a coach say to me right now? You know, how would a coach help me to get back up when I've fallen down or I've really messed up? What would they be saying? They wouldn't be calling me names, because that wouldn't help. They would, you know. And so it's just giving yourself this idea of this concept of, what is the voice that I need to hear right now that's going to help me through? And that's where the idea with the book came, where each chapter begins with a letter from me. It's this idea that often in those moments, you just need someone to bring the right words that helps to shift your attention in the right direction and give you that sort of drive in your belly that's just going to get you back up and pushing through this difficult moment. So, you know, it's really hard to do that for ourselves in the moment. It takes time and training and practice. And I think often we learn that from hearing it. And so if we don't have anyone in our lives that seems to bring the right words that we need to hear, then we can get it from a book, right?
Yes, you can. And you can get it from podcasts and from social media clips. Yeah. And what I loved about what you just said, though, because I really want to highlight this, is that recognizing that you kind of have engaged in regrettable or despicable or hurtful or painful behavior, even just recognizing it. I love this reframe that's a really great sign of progress, that you have the ick factor with yourself. And that's different than holding it over your head. And so if you can recognize it, is there any trick to reframing then, like how you actually talk to yourself moving forward? Like when you can't think of anything else, is there something that you give to the clients that you work with that is kind of universal, that helps them shake off the hold that being hard on yourself can have?
A line that's often used in therapeutic work when we're helping someone build and train in kind of self-compassion is, I did the best that I knew how with what I had at the time. And I have new insight now and new skills now that I didn't have before. When we were talking earlier about the kind of idea of where you focus your attention and what causes anxiety, if your attention is focused on the past too much, you will get depressed and you will get miserable. If your attention is always focused on the future and things that might happen but haven't happened yet, you're going to get anxious. And if you're focused on the present moment, there's much less to be depressed or anxious about. It's just the present moment. It's just me and you and here. And that's mindfulness, really. That's the idea of choosing where you focus your attention. And so being able to, like you say something like, I did the best I knew how with what I had at the time, even if I had very little at the time in terms of skill. And now I'm going to bring myself back to here.
And I can figure out how to do better. You know, you mentioned the future, and Dr. Julie, I would love to know how you help a client who feels a lot of uncertainty about the future. And right now, I think it's at an all-time high when you look at the headlines and when you look at the reports around the spike in anxiety and stress that people are feeling around the world. So what are tools that you can use to manage the uncertainty when you look out to the future?
Yeah. I think when everything's uncertain, a lot of the distress that causes is when we're trying to control it. You know, it's a bit like your book, isn't it? With the let them, right? It's the allow life to be uncertain. Every move in life is uncertain. Nothing is given. Nothing is fully controllable. And so it's probably one of life's most important skills to be able to tolerate that uncertainty and to know that when everything becomes really stressful and really uncertain, narrowing your focus is probably the most helpful sort of real-time tool to just focus on the next couple of steps ahead. What am I doing that's keeping me moving forward, even in times of, you know, great uncertainty or stress or, you know, all sorts of problems that might be up ahead. And certainly that's for me when I talk about the whole, you know, cancer experience, is something that does to you that takes away. I mean, you always, I think everyone probably worries about, you know, will I get this or that when I'm older, and when will that stuff like that happen? But when it does happen, you realize you had a certain degree of safety. This idea that happens to other people mostly.
Yes.
Even if you're a bit worried about it, there's a kind of distance that you have. And I remember thinking, I don't want to be in this club. I don't want to be in this club. I did not sign up for this. And I think that was this sense of anything can happen. Like right now, it feels more possible than it ever did. And so even once you're okay and out the other side of treatment, and so many people survive it, and, it's just fantastic that, people are, having successful treatments, but it leaves with you this sense of anything can happen. And probably the most fundamental way that I deal with that is saying, yes, that's why I have to live as if I have a future. Because otherwise I'm back to rabbit in headlights. Anything could happen, so I can't live. I can't carry on.
I'm glad that you said that, because I think when people hear you have to allow the uncertainty, you have to allow like the fact that they're things out of your control, whether it's the headlines or the fact that you're now single again.
Yeah.
And you didn't want to be, or that you just had a miscarriage and you didn't want it, or you just got the cancer diagnosis, or somebody that you love is going in for surgery and it's all uncertain, or AI feels like it's taking over the world and will it take over your job? And so that sense of like, oh my gosh, I just have to let them, I have to allow this because I can't control it. I'm so happy you reminded us that that's not where it ends, because you brought it right back to the prey versus the predator, which is there are small things that I can do to put the foot forward and get ahead of this thing, or just focus on what is important to me. And there was a tool in there, which is believing that you have a future, believing that things are better. Why is that important?
Because if you don't, you have nothing, right? You have to live as if you have a future, because otherwise you start dropping into this sense of doom that everything is pointless if you feel that you don't have a future. And so you have to live with that meaning and purpose. And because if you don't act as if you have a future and then you do, then you mess up your future. So a lot of it is about sort of bearing that kind of suffering side of it and moving forward anyway. And then things, you get these little pockets of time where things feel a bit better, or things, you open up the possibility of experiencing kind of pleasure or meaning or purpose throughout, despite the fact that the world is often scary and uncertain. And in some ways, it's always been that way.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. So in your private practice and with your online audience, what are you seeing that people are struggling the most with right now?
I think there's this kind of mix between the emotional stuff. So understanding that there is a way to deal with emotion, and that when you experience a bunch of negative or painful emotions, that doesn't mean something is wrong with you. Linked with relationships.
What are the big struggles in relationships?
I think it's a mix of dealing with my emotion in the relationship and dealing with someone else's emotion in the relationship. And I think we're lied to, especially on social media now, about this idea that, you hear all this stuff about you've got to be healed before you get into a relationship.
Oh my God.
Like, when are you healed? I mean, I think if I had followed that rule, I would never have married Matt. We've been together 20 years, and it's this idea that you've got to become this sort of perfect idea of human being, and the other person's got to have done the same work, so that when you get together, you have this perfect fairy tale relationship, and it's never hard. And it's just utter rubbish. It's just not true whatsoever. And so when people then struggle in relationships because you're both dealing with emotion and stress and all the ups and downs of life, people then think that it's not the right relationship, or you're getting it wrong. And actually, that is the process of a relationship, is building that together and going through those things and learning about each other in the process, and forgiving each other for when you bring your worst to each other. And you just build so much strength through that. So I think there's this combination of what on earth is emotion all about and how do I deal with it? But also then what do I do with that in a relationship? When the relationship shows me up to not be my perfect self and I'm not being my best self, what does that mean? It's so yeah, some sort of combination between those two, I think.
And what is what's the most important thing that you think we need to know to make our relationships better?
No relationship is perfect, but that doesn't mean you have to give up on it. That I think the strongest relationships have often been through the most together, right? Because you feel safety when you've been through stuff together and it's pulled you together and not apart. I think this whole misconception that everything's got to be perfect, otherwise it's not the right person or it's not the right relationship.
So, Dr. Julie, what if you're in a relationship with somebody who doesn't want to deal with their emotions? They don't want to look inward. They don't want to have these kinds of conversations with you. Like, what advice do you give to your clients when they come in and they talk about the fact that I'm trying to connect, I'm trying to get them to process their emotion? They're not opening up.
Yeah. In some ways, I would ask why they're trying to get them to open up and what's going on there, because we can only change ourselves and we can only improve ourselves. And again, it's that focus on what am I bringing to the relationship? Because it's an okay way to be. If you're not a talker and you don't really talk about emotions that much, that's okay. For some people, that works. And we don't all have to be really insightful or psychologically minded or anything like that for stuff to work. And sometimes I think that's okay. I mean, like Matt and I, for example, I'm well into this, I'm a full-on psychology nerd, constantly reading about stuff. I'm a therapist, so always reflecting on things. And he's probably the opposite to me in that sense. But that means we have different strengths and we even each other out. Gosh, can you imagine how we talk for hours if we were both psychologists?
You'd have no fun.
Oh my God, it would be awful.
I wouldn't want you at a dinner party. You're like, not those two.
Yeah.
God.
And actually, you look at online about some of these sort of apparently ideal ways to, repair an argument or those kind of things. Actually, for us, probably a lot of the time, we just use humor. And we know each other so well now that we can kind of go, oh, you're doing that thing again. And then we both have a laugh about it and then we're back in. And it's okay for it to be that way. We don't all have to be, kind of therapists to have what could be an ideal relationship.
Since so many people are either struggling with anxiety or they have someone in their life who is, what is the advice that you give your clients when you're working with them through a period where they feel anxious?
Yeah. I think probably one of the first bits is the idea that anxiety isn't something that's wrong in your brain. It's not a problem that is a fault of yours. It's not something that's wrong with you. It's an experience. And often what happens in therapy is this process of someone kind of says, I'm feeling this, or this is coming up for me. And then what follows is a judgment, that means I'm weak or I'm not coping and everyone else can do this. And what we do is we kind of go, okay, notice that judgment. Notice how you just judged yourself, how you're feeling right now. Or comparing, apparently everyone else has it together, then no one else feels this way. And let's just drop the judgment and turn back to that feeling with curiosity. Isn't that interesting that you feel that way? What's going on that makes you vulnerable to that feeling at this point? Let's say, I don't know, a new mum, for example, who finds themselves totally isolated, has no idea what to do and how best to look after this baby. And, husband's gone back to work, and the anxiety is just huge. And I remember thinking when I first had a baby, I don't know if I can handle this degree of fear about how am I going to get it right for this little human being for forevermore. I don't know if I can deal with. And so a lot of it is this kind of this idea that if you turn towards that feeling with curiosity, you can hear what it has to say. And often it has something to tell you about what you need at the time. And so, for example, in that kind of new mum scenario, usually that's around, I need human connection. I need some reassurance. I need adult conversation, or I need to feel safe in this situation. And so the answers start to appear when you're just willing to look at the emotion and ask, what are you telling me? What is this? And sometimes it has a lot to say, and other times it might not have a lot to say. And that's okay too, because what we teach in kind of emotion regulation work is to feel an emotion, look at it and say, is this warranted? And is it proportionate to the situation? Because, sometimes if I haven't had enough sleep, or I'm dehydrated, or I've had too much coffee or something, I might have a really extreme reaction to something that I would normally have a small reaction to. So that would be disproportionate to the situation because of those other factors that made me vulnerable to that. So if you're willing to kind of look at, okay, what's going on here? then the answers start to appear. But because so many of us are not willing to look at it with curiosity, we just judge ourselves for the fact we've had the feeling, and then we try to numb it and push it away. And then we're in a battle.
Well, Dr. Julie Smith, you're changing lives. You are helpful. Thank you, thank you, thank you for showing up every day for the world online. Thank you for writing this incredible instant bestseller, Open When, which is truly exactly as you envisioned. It is a guide to life, because life is hard, but you don't have to be so hard on yourself. And there are simple things that you can do to put your arm around yourself and help you get yourself through it.